About the paintings. Prelude. Some stream of consciousness from the typewriter. Key West After Dark. The Nocturnes. By Mr Dwyer. When looking in chronological order, what may at first look like something of a broad or comprehensive spread actually starts to reveal itself as mainly a deep dive into the second half of 2025. Of the 27 pieces that were selected and framed, 4 are from 2023, none from 2024, 16 from 2025, and finally 7 from 2026. One of which was made right up at the last possible evening before my framing deadline window closed. Not that 2024 wasn't relevant or fruitful, Actually, it made for 90 to 100 major ink and watercolor paintings. A style shift that took me down an exploratory path, electing for ink out of the bottle, applied with a brush, rather than a heavy Faber-Castell brush pen. 2024 also is highlighted by my 2 major art pilgrimages. First to Paris in May, where I wholeheartedly justified a room way up 7 flights of rickety Parisian steps where there was a word of magnificent balcony and view of the Eiffel Tower, but a distant one, glorifying distance, from the top of old Montmartre, where all my early modern mystic heroes saw it and rambled around those oh-so-wonderful hilly cobblestone streets. You'd think that I would have maybe stayed up there and painted from that balcony constantly because it really was so magnificent, but of course I fit in a daily plein air painting practice each day too, packing my gear up each day and wandering around town looking like a mountain climber with my painting gear meticulously packed with me from QS. I had no other reason to go. I had no budget for Paris, let alone that balcony view, but it legitimized some things that I was looking for in my many stacks of modern art history books. It took on a new tangible impression when I stood in front of them. Their grandeur, my silent love, and the beauty of finally seeing a real brushstroke. Painting has only stood in mind as reproductions. And there it is in person, and there is a moment to just take it in. Not to look and look at your own intention, your own little head, taking the place of what beauty is there. Or just the open head. I digress because, here I go, and I really wanted to focus on the 27 in the show. But anyway, I returned to QS after Paris, all charged up with different ideas and perspectives, and ultimately that appreciation when you can feel it, that gratitude of travel, but the little side joy it is to return home, change individual. So after Paris and I returned, thinking of one thing, but then winding up leaving town in July 2024 with renewed attention for tropical color. After my return from Paris, straight from there to, before I know it, I was off to Provincetown out there on that little winding tip Cape Cod where namely John Clayton was, who I met in Key West, but all he ever wanted to talk about were things like masses, painting volume, and he said, come to Provincetown. And so often people talk and dream, but I was ready, so I acted and drove up there by myself, my little red Prius full of painting supplies, and a basic idea about the history of that little end of the road. Thankfully, upon my arrival, I saw a bit of it in real time, and I could see why it has a magnetic pull. Why artists split time between there and Key West, this old dreamer, painter, idealist I knew. Mr. Clayton took me to some of his hotspots, so far as exhibiting homes of his art, and also his little art studio. He offered to let me sleep on the ground there, and if I brought a sleeping bag, but there was barely any floor space with all his art supplies sprawled out, his stacks of panels painted his own way, the smell of oil paint, solvents. All wonderful of it. I elected for another expensive guest house like Paris in a way, but instead of the Eiffel Tower and the old city as a vista, it was up a hidden steep staircase, adorned exotic colors by way, not named but quickly painted repeatedly. Mr. Clayton visited me at that hidden guest house and was so excited to paint from that balcony because it was his stomping grounds, Provincetown. But that vista overlooking the tiny tip of the last piece of land of Cape Cod, that lighthouse up there, all those little rooftops peeking out from the lush summer foliage has always looked so strange to me since I moved to Key West in 2021, removed certain shades of green and foliage that I was once so familiar with. Here, Key West has a warmer general green, more yellow, but the mainland and especially the northeast has that pine green, that cooler green, almost reaches winter green, bluish. Anyway, here I go again. Now you know a little bit more about me. 2024, it's quite an introspective year for me. Reclusive to an extent, and distant from what 2025 would become, and with the useful 2024 travels, I took my ink and watercolor style to perhaps my first endpoint. I didn't feel stagnant or finished, but by fall and the end of October, I left Key West again. Shipped myself out to San Juan. My old friend from high school was having a destination wedding up in that fabulous Puerto Rican rainforest. And of course, I brought my huge painting backpack and hit a few more foreign paintings that by then was so fascinating to me because I'd never had to try or think about it, but always would transform my results I was starting to get used to in Key West. Right before I left for the Puerto Rico trip, I met a wild firecracker of a lady, Braley her name was, who one day walked into the Key West Collective with a man about double her age who claimed to be on an art acquisition binge. He was fresh off the streets of Duval, with all those wild galleries, no local artists at all. But that's where he met Braley, who somehow or another became his art collector advisor. She was helping him transition to acquiring work by some local artists, Carrie Disrude, Susie DePoo, rather than Peter Max and supposedly Warhol, which I found out later. Well, they walked in midday and were quite quick, but did the classic we'll be back thing, which I believe maybe, but by 5 p.m., closing time, I raced up my studio and grabbed my gear to go to Mallory Square, and on my way back that way I rode by Caroline again, and there the two of them were, trying the locked door to the collective, looking for me even though it was nearly 6 by then. Of course I stopped and excitedly opened the doors and turned on the gallery lights, and boom, claimed one. One of mine. Smaller framed piece hanging in the front of the gallery, depicting a half shell. Anyway, so Braley and Dan, the wealthy collector, took the painting, and I went off to Mallory still to paint portraits and had a party to look forward to. Long story short, Dan had a bar rented, throwing a party next week. Maggie and Rich, the gallery owners, they came too. Of course, Braley, personal art consultant, who was wearing a sparkly black dress that night at the party, and the whole setting was a hoot under the low red tinted bar, and impressive amount of guests, especially for someone that wasn't even a local. And the next day, Braley and Dan would visit my studio in the Armory and sit for a little portrait of the two of them. Anyway, I'm mentioning this in relation because after that portrait was complete and they adored it, really, Dan went looking through my work and around the studio. All of it. Eventually, after flipping through both my large flip books of unframed work paper, he asked to buy two from deep in the books, deep in the archive, really. One, a quarter sheet ink watercolor, a study of a Picasso portrait, a woman. Another one, oil painting, a piece of cardboard that was probably roughly the same size, 11 by 15. Just a study of Cézanne, and including an old man walking with a cane through thick green. Finally, a large abstract oil painting, too, that was a concept and composition of my own, including blazing pinks and gold and wild brushstrokes that were, yes, abstract, but I consider them thoughtful still, and hidden were a few silhouettes of cats in different positions around the brushstrokes, perhaps as if the color was a big cat climbing wall. Perhaps this had an even stronger effect on me because it was also my 29th birthday. In just a few days, I knew I was headed out to Miami to pick up my great friend Paul from the airport, and then the two of us would hop on a dirt cheap flight to San Juan. I'd already been there once, and Paul hadn't, and I knew he would fall in love with it when he saw it. I had just enough time in Key West for my departure to make a quite delicate ink drawing of Braley from a photo I took with the two of them standing with my paintings acclaimed in front porch of the Armory entrance. I was made it within hours of their departure and talented at birthday, and I was 29, fresh. I was already beginning to call it my 20s victory lap. So charged up, partly due to having sold some of my work in oil to them, along with having a new crush on the art consultant, and a combination of general circumstances. I was excited about 29 being my victory lap into 30 and made a tall, slim version of that ink portrait of Braley over an oil on canvas. And Even though it was only my third composition in oil made all that year, when it was finished, I was happy and excited. Of course, shared a photo of it with her, and next morning, I was off. Miami, and in Puerto Rico for a week, and left my old painting supplies back, even though a small part of me wanted to bring them instead of my usual ink and watercolor rig. But I didn't, and I ended up liking it that way, and loved so much stepping into San Juan, those cobblestone, hilly streets, and treating it like stepping into a different time. And there was Paul, who looks like a time traveler himself, and excitedly packed his old Key West outfits, which are more gonzo journalist and typical tourist outfits, and we thrived taking leisure at street cafes, taking long morning reading, local newspapers, and wandering end to end around that town, and painting a few big ones, including one from the rooftop of our place we had a room at, and called the Gallery Inn. Lives up to every square inch of its name, and placement at the top of San Juan, looking over the wildly different sea from Key West, deep and blue, rougher, from such a vantage point that had little in common with Key West and the shallow turquoise coastlines I knew. I came back, and even though Paul wanted to stay, and a tiny part of me wanted to figure out a way myself, but I had all sorts of things to come back to, and Paul, stayed a few extra days out there and flew back to Canada. And I said, come on back to Key West. No, he was through with it. We continue a regular correspondence because we align in many ways. It always keeps me charged up, my paints and thoughts, and I think does the same for him too. Upon arrival, and like a stick of dynamite, I painted oil painting every night for 19 days straight. Not so much as one splash of watercolor on that time until day 19, receiving a commission request to paint Louie's backyard for a young Key West enthusiast who runs a successful social media account focused on Jimmy Buffett for millennials. He asked if I could include his parents sitting at the bar in the photo, which I did, but also to his surprise additionally included a figure under long blonde hair playing guitar who I based off of Jockey George. He loved it. Took 2 separate attempts to get it right, but after 19 days of oil, I was thrilled again, looking at it differently in a groove. That commission was December, and there was much excitement painting exclusively in watercolor. Other than one self-portrait in oil. Then it was New Year's Eve. Facing 2025, I returned to oil and felt ready to not only move freely between those mediums, but do it in a way that was less focused on specifics like technique or process, more focused on narrative, bringing myself into a space that felt more present in the community in terms of what I was painting, who I was painting, and the types of stories I wanted to reflect. It was 2025, and it was my 20s victory lap, and I had found comfort in a routine of taking late nights to paint in my studio. Making new friends, the space became more of a social one, more musical, more multimedia. More lay out a big sheet of paper on the ground and painted on it throughout the night. In other instances, perhaps picking up bass or another creative mode, and the idea to actually put together a series of paintings for my first solo show, let alone the theme of it being nocturnes, still many months away. September 2025, to be specific, came around, but no matter. Here, chronologically, comes the first paintings to be included, with the exception of 4 2023 anchors. Now it's 2025 and 2026, and that's Key West After Dark. Anchors. Stories, my painting career and identity.